Welcome everyone to our weekly IT news show. Hope you're live, looks live, as usual. Internet stuff, but more to this later. The last show over a week ago, and since then, as usual, a lot of stuff accumulated here. Already deleted some. So let's get straight into it, starting with Intel. They write here semi-accurate in the flaming wreckage of the Q2 2020 Intel analyst call. Did the company really come clean on 7 nanometer semi-accurate things? They didn't. They just set stage for the future delays and worse problems. I think they said there's something announced earlier, delayed by 12 months, while the first devices coming out 6 months after initially planned. Of course, you all know, I don't need to tell any of you how delayed the Intel process is and how much they get their a backlog compared to other TSMC and other companies. And in retrospect, it's probably fair to say that AMD made a better choice there, factoring out global foundries and allowing them to operate independently. Maybe in retrospect, something that saved AMD, and the fruit of that work and restructuring certainly shows. That also probably shows that working with other companies, cooperating, like specializing in your software and software and hardware design, and having the many billion dollar manufacturing process to other experts, no pun intended, TSMC and others, works pretty well for all the other companies. So yeah, Ruth at Intel continues, but raise your hand if you're surprised, and welcome everyone in the audience, much appreciated. In other news, ARM is for sale and Nvidia apparently is interested, at least they say, speculate and write here. Apple apparently isn't. Quite a bit to a surprise to me. I would have expected Apple to snitch that up as well. Who will buy one of the world's most widespread chip designers? Although one needs to keep in mind that ARM is not selling devices themselves, so actually the profit structure, the last time I looked at the numbers, but probably I should do that again, not the highest profit there, certainly because for all the very cheap silicon there, the entry-level stuff, they cannot charge much. Although, yeah, design ones charge forever, but this charge, it's certainly just a couple of cents or so in the entry-level Asian ARM chips. Of course, the future, we've seen this here on this channel. Right now they are selling in big volumes, but so have MIPS, Spark and PowerPC at a time. The future, of course, with open designs like RISC-V, a little bit questionable, not really sure if that will continue at it. And also not really sure is Nvidia the best buyer for that. Maybe they make the same mistake as Intel and AMD, which both at the time also had ARM and ARM processors, which they sometimes purchased and later sold off again in terms of Intel. So yeah, always a question, do you spend, like in terms of Nvidia, all your money for something that might not increase your profit too much and just sidestep your business? Anyway, it's a phasing out business in the next decade or two with RISC-V and other advancements. In similar news, Border Patrol there in the USA does end run around variants, simply buys license plate reader data. In case you were wondering, recurring shout out here for consumer privacy protection stuff, and just a regular reminder of security issues, not only in devices, hardware, software, network stacks, but also real world implications. And yeah, isn't that nice data you have there? And here are some millions for that. Apparently US Customs and Border Protection can track everyone's car all over the country. So yeah, how much, how big is that issue here? Apparently can track everyone's car all over the country, allegedly. Massive trove of automated license plate scanner data. A new report reveals and CBP didn't need to get any single variant to do it. And yeah, recurring theme here, governments asking for crypto backdoors, and yeah, that things like this is the outcome. Speaking of government backdoors, apparently the German BKA can read WhatsApp, at least allegedly here, encrypted communication. Not a big problem, they write here in this public news. New research there from WDR and BR of West German and Bavarian broadcasting there, can read for long time chats of WhatsApp and so on. And apparently, I think also here in Germany they constantly call for more state Trojan stuff and crypto backdoors and crypto, and yeah, it's always for the children, obviously, like we can't track child pornography stuff and because crypto's like, yeah, just have some police and look around there. I mean, don't really need to break crypto for that, but it's even as hilarious as, yeah, they can read it anyway. So much to governments even here asking for backdoors when they can already still read it. And how do they do it? I think I saw somewhere that they do it with advertisements. So 2020, let's see. So they can apparently track it in real time. Text, video and images, voice messages of WhatsApp communications in real time. And they apparently use the function that WhatsApp can be controlled over your internet browser, WhatsApp web, and regular feature there. And I think, yeah, also here this terrorist thing in Berlin, and apparently, yeah, they can track it apparently, allegedly, and yet they were, yeah, government always asking for more backdoors, more tracking, and they track already, and yet all the terrorist shit happens anyway. So I would rather prefer when they stop the terrorist stuff and not read all our WhatsApp messages. But anyway, maybe that is too much to ask. I think I read somewhere that they use advertising for that. Let's see, do we find this here? At least I found this I saw this somewhere. So your mileage may vary, but apparently wouldn't surprise me if they use advertisements and inject their like harmful of exploiting one single browser kind of web view access in terms of advertisements, and use JavaScript and other breakage to read the stuff. In similar news, Apple, Biden and Musk and many high-profile Twitter accounts hacked the other week in a crypto scam. You probably heard about this. And apparently they asked there for a really hilarious scheme of that people even fall for that. Alleged messages of wanting to give back to the community, and apparently doubling some return of cryptocurrency. And yeah, I really wonder that people fall for this stuff, but apparently they do. And I saw on some other website interviewing someone who fell for that, and he basically said, yeah, when Elon Musk said it, then all like alarm signs were forgotten. So yeah, so much to the regular user thinking through stuff they see on the internet. And apparently I saw somewhere, not sure if it's in this, that this was it on this? Somewhere they messaged that they got this with social engineering, with Twitter people working from home and some using some shared chats. So apparently some Twitter internal credentials were shared on some internal like Zoom chat stuff or whatever. And do we have this here? Can we even search? Not. But yeah, so much to 2020 hacking Twitter with social engineering, some internal administration account credentials from yeah, some shared, yeah, also 2020 sharing your your big business company admin account stuff on some shared chat messaging stuff. Why? Anyway, but that's not the only thing. Also, Crates.io security advisory from the Rust people who said we got this, we got safe computing, and yeah, but Crates.io security advisory, and this also shows more type safe, memory safe languages like Rust do not simply cure everything, and it still requires, even if you avoid certain types of security vulnerabilities, it's not proving everything. If you implement stuff, like if you implement a login dialog that doesn't check the password, it's as insecure in Rust as it is in C. And so apparently they, until recently, API keys of Crates.io were generated using PostgreSQL random functions. So yeah, 2020, Rust and Crates random function, still a thing which is not cryptographically secure random number generator. It's like, yeah, and that's apparently what we need Rust for. Apparently they, terminal of the events, I think they, what have they revoken everything, or so they deployed a code change, cryptographically secure random number generator, and generate new API keys for visiting Crates.io me, and they apologize for the inconvenience that causes in terms of Rustland. In similar news, what was that? SAP, of all big companies, released security updates for critical vulnerability in NetWeaver Java, patch ASAP. This is for CV 2020-6087 and 6086. Let's see what exactly this is. Yeah, SAP Java administration user creation. It's like 2020 v SAP user creation. It's Java. It's like, what more should I say? Allows to check SAP LM configuration without missing authorization check vulnerability. And yeah, 2020 SAP missing authorization check. Yeah, no Java, no Rust can help you with that. Let's see, comments there. Glaucus writes, what are your thoughts on Rust, Signum, Crystal for system programming compared to C? Yeah, it's probably something for another video otherwise. But thanks for asking. Probably something we make dedicated videos about, otherwise this always becomes an endless diversion here of random sorts. In similar news, Garmin services in production go down after allegedly ransomware attack. Recurring theme here, ransomware in your local police station, hospital, university, California, what was it, vehicle database registration, something, your local government, parliament, Honda, car manufacturer, maybe even Porsche, whoever, whatsoever, you name it. But 2020, your smartwatch and wearable maker Garmin planning multi-day maintenance window to deal with ransomware incident. Also, in similar news, your smartwatch doesn't work anymore for a couple of days, no syncing whatsoever, because it needs to be connected to the cloud. Obviously, why should this stuff work remotely, which is also why I don't have any smartwatch, because anyway, but yeah, cloud, that is 2020 cloud. So basically someone else has your data, and if they're down, then it's down. July 23rd, company currently planning a multi-day window, maybe until this weekend or something. And yeah, that is the reality of insecure programming stuff. Then not only your smartwatch, maybe your navigation, like SatNav, Google Maps, Twitter, or if you're using Office, whatever that name is, 365 or whatever, or Google Cloud Web Spread, then yeah, you can't get your work done because stuff is down. And yeah, evergreen ask why is this stuff internet connected, because yeah, 2020. Anyway, good question. My question also, good that we agree. Speaking about stuff like this, Cisco small business wireless and VPN firewall static default credential vulnerability. 2020, Cisco recurring participant here in our weekly show. If there is one company that you can depend on, then certainly Cisco, of delivering you weekly insecurities, not like you would work with pros. Vulnerability in their telnet service, it's like, dude, seriously. It's like we just had this last week, or actually 9 days ago or something in our last show. 2020, yes, a recurring theme, Cisco still working with not only telnet, but static default credentials because whatever. What does it mean? That means they have a static default credentials for all of you for who that is too scientific. That static means it's a hard-coded password in less scientific terms. Affected products, here small business stuff, some router, wireless, multifunction, VPN, also yeah, VPN because static password. Anyway, there is no workaround for this fixed password, it just probably updates the stuff. And anyway, in case you were wondering, in similar news, Cloudflare was down and so was half of the internet because in 2020, internet previously funded as a loosely connected stuff of by the military in terms of ARPANET, in case you were wondering. And actually internet built as a loosely connected grid of interconnected services that you still have some services or most services online when some nodes fail. But hey, we're 2020, everything to Cloudflare because YOLO whatever. And then your single point of failure goes down, and yeah, so goes most of the internet. Today, configuration also, yeah, was it hacked? Was it ransomware? No, it was a configuration error allegedly in their backbone network caused an outage for the internet properties. What properties and internet properties? Sounds somewhat like real estate, but anyway, Cloudflare services, the last 27 minutes, saw the traffic drop about 50% across their network. And architecture of backbone, the outage didn't affect the entire Cloudflare network. Yeah, also if the internet would still be a loosely connected graph of disposable servers where some nodes could fail, this would not have happened. But also 2020, maybe check your configuration before you roll it out. Something of that sort. Evergreen writes, well, the thing is there are people using Cisco finding bugs versus using a smaller network vendor where still like this exists and not found. Yeah, we had this in the other news. That is true. However, stuff is also found in the other stuff, like cheaper stuff. Yeah, but that Cisco uses telnet and default password certainly doesn't speak for their security. Other stuff is also found, but this is also a recurring theme here. I would wish this stuff would be, I mentioned this with smartphones here, but also certainly with this wireless stuff. In my opinion, we should have generic software running on there, like generic open source FreeNAS or T2 NAS or WRT, whatever, so that you can like bring your Windows and Linux to it and not rely on like encumbered vendor software where you don't know what you're getting. And the same for smartphones. I wish this vendor locked in stuff and custom Android versions and Apple iOS stuff would end, and this would be treated like vendors sell. It's a computer, would be treated like a computer, and we could just bring our own operating system to fully avoid having outdated stuff on your access point. Because in my opinion, it's like even an access point, you should be able to install just your software, and then you would have your trusted clean vanilla Linux network appliance thing, and would be able to deploy updates yourself and not rely on a vendor to maybe eventually in a year or two and bring an update or not. Here in the EU, new regulation strengthens the hand of developers and publishers dealing with storefronts, recurring theme here, and our own criticism in terms of the App Store stuff. And so this is just Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store there. And with all the people always telling me, but the App Store is amazing. No, it isn't. Developers, previous video, we ourselves have so many issues, and taking 30% for mediocre services. But yeah, quite some backslash here, thankfully. And Strengthening developers, Article 7 follows similar theme, with storefronts having to disclose any differential treatment. This is, for example, whether some vendors like Spotify and so get preferred treatment because why should they get Amazon and stuff get preferred treatment over smaller developers? And in general, this kind of vendor lock-in, I said this multiple times, in my opinion, not the greatest development in terms of open computing, that you cannot just bring your own software without hacking and cracking it. In my opinion, just what I just said a minute ago, we should be allowed to bring our own operating system, even for an outdated iPad, whether you don't like iOS anymore and want Android on your iPhone, or whether you don't get software updates because it's a 5-year-old iPad and you want to use it for your home automation stuff, or whatever the case might be, where this stuff could still be used for 10 years to come with your custom Linux flavor. If Apple calls it computers, we should, in any case, whether actually independently of whether companies call it computers, we should be able to bring our own software and do whatever we please with it. Yeah, comments, they are, Evergreen says they avoid box switches for open vSwitch for layer 2 and 3 and stuff. In similar news here in Europe, you might have heard we deal relatively okayish in most countries here, and here in Germany we have a Corona app which they celebrate as one of the most installed with some 6 or 10 million or whatever. And I said before on Twitter that, in my opinion, as a computer scientist with 20 years experience, this app is pointless. It will barely work. This money, this costed 50 million or whatever, crazy, because companies like big business like SAP and German Telecom developed this. So yeah, why did it cost 50? This trivial application that should have costed $1 million or 5, I think, if I recall correctly, 50 million, and it barely does everything. In my opinion, this 50 million would be better spent on masks and public education and funding real medicine, because this is the kind of, in my opinion, IT over-promising bullshit that just wastes money and does nothing. So what is the issue? Not only, like many other people said, this app will only work if 90% or so install it, and it was clear for me that never 90% will install it. And then I always said, even if you walk through the streets, this Bluetooth low energy stuff is way too imprecise to really collect whether you, I mean, you yourself, actually being careful is more usable than this, because how should the application know whether you stand at a bus stop with a group of people, whether there is something in between, whether you are just passing them with 2 meter distance? It is hilarious. Basically, it's anyway. And then even with 10 million people or whatever, this percentage is so low that you walk through the street and you meet 100 people who don't have the app anyway. So a pure waste of money, time and effort, and in my opinion, but leave in the comments below what you think. And on top of this, of course, Apple and Google engineering, this stuff doesn't even work. Last week we had doesn't really work reliably on Android. This week we have doesn't really work reliably on iPhone, because Apple do #peak bugs, just what we are known here. No Apple for that. And so what is the issue? Apparently they say, allegedly at least, that the stuff, and this I also said before here on this channel or Twitter, that this contact tracing API stuff from Apple does not really work in the background, which is also hilarious for data. Also, yeah, 2020 Apple consumer protection, data protection stuff. COVID contact tracing app cannot in the background access Bluetooth LE energy stuff, and I called this out weeks ago, Twitter or here on something, and this is exactly what happened now. Now, also I wonder, have they done testing? The SAP and German Telecom, they only notice no in the field after 2 or 3 weeks. Oh, YOLO, whatever, it doesn't really work reliably. It's like, yeah, whatever. So somehow in the background, when it's running in the background, and I think we had this on this news show, that in Australia, this bloody application needs to be in the foreground. I mean, what seriously were they thinking? Of course it doesn't work like this, that you run around on the street with this bloody app in the foreground. I mean, certainly battery drain and display energy. It's hilarious. So yeah, there are problems, stuff doesn't run in the background, and they blame Apple. It's so funny when my customer with our application, I tell customers, yeah, sorry, it works as not as perfect because Apple macOS, and customers always, no, Apple is amazing and genius and whatever, but yeah, SAP, German Telecom, yeah, it's Apple's fault. But this is also the issue, right? We don't have, well, just what I said, the third case where we can use this example, we don't have full control over our devices. We can't even access Bluetooth how we want. And even if it's an official application, not our own homebrew garbage, but official, maybe some could potentially say most important application of this year, and yeah, Bluetooth, whatever, it doesn't really API, YOLO, whatever. We can't do this because yeah, IT is hard. But here we also see this, there is this saying in some languages and cultures, they only cook with water. It's like, yeah, also maybe we don't watch this space. They only cook with water, right? Apple is only cooking with water, and that is how peak bugs their software is, right? With all the people always like, Apple, the holy of genius of, yeah, it's like, no, peak bugs in macOS, iOS, in normal applications, all over the place, and the most important API of the year, it's like, yeah, whatever, no background access, whatever. In case you were wondering, in the other IT news segment a week or two ago, we had this issue, Samsung Blu-ray player bricked itself, and now we have the resolution here of, yeah, people like myself suspected a firmware update, because that is how usually stuff breaks with a firmware update. But apparently it was not a firmware update, but downloading an XML config file that broke the firmware. So yeah, 2020 XML config breaks your Blu-ray. Can't make this shit up. It's hilarious. Since the middle of last month, thousands of Samsung customers found their older internet-connected Blu-ray players had stopped working. Also, yeah, two things. So, two things. One is defensive programming, right? Normally you should, if you have a consumer device, you should test it so that even with garbage configuration data, it like boots and can still firmware update or update. So what is the issue? And this is the first issue, defensive programming. And testing. And so the second thing is testing, because they seriously didn't test what XML config, although it could be configuration error, so that they like didn't test like this particular XML config. Maybe it was auto-generated and it was some server outage and the config was as empty. I think here's maybe an example. Here, so that apparently comes from HTTPS config PRD, Samsung Cloud Solutions 2020, and Samsung Cloud Solutions Net Open API Dictionary Log Policy Config, and it's like somewhat empty or something of whatever. Here's a problem. Apparently the XML file sent out on June 18th wasn't formatted in a way compatible with the device's code. So valid XML file, it contained an empty list element, and allegedly anyway, according to this specialist. And so yeah, it could be due to a server configuration issue, that maybe the back end couldn't connect to some database or something. So it's not like testing, but something broke. But it's still testing, more testing, that they released the firmware and product into the wild, that it would survive getting an broken, like empty or like fully syntax error broken config. In either case, it's hilarious. But yeah, similar to your smartwatch, connected stuff and your Blu-ray player, cloud stuff, firmware updates, config files, bricking himself. And also, yeah, 2020 Blu-ray player doesn't start with an empty XML config, probably for your DRM. Probably you were wondering what the heck is it for? Most likely DRM, I guess. Was it a server type operation policy? So yeah, whatever, usually this is DRM for this crypted stuff. Also, yeah, product DRM only degrading customer experience, right? So it only makes the product worse in terms of, yeah, sometimes doesn't work. The pirate the stuff anyway, and the valid users, the actual users, for them it doesn't work, because yeah, their precious Blu-ray player loading their DRM stuff breaks itself. So yeah, DRM at its finest. Crashing the main program results in a, also yeah, monolithic application similar to the Linux kernel. recurring theme here, monolithic main program crashes and restarts. So yeah, so much to that. Also, yeah, maybe they should have tested that, right? But anyway, last but not least, Trump campaign angry that cell carriers blocked spammy text to voters. Recurring theme here, government wants to censor their shit, and yeah, governments censoring stuff because censoring and crypto backdoors, the main themes of China, UK, US, Germany, you name it, Russia and stuff. But also then they get their fine share of their own dog food, and it's like angry because but to be honest, that is also what spam filter should do, right? If you spam people, you shouldn't be surprised if your spam doesn't arrive. So kudos to spam filters working as advertised. At least one thing finally does. But yeah, you should also not be surprised if you always want your stuff censored and stuff, if getting a fine share of your own medicine there. In much more amazing news, Worms Armageddon gets a patch after 21 years. Why is this newsworthy? Not only with the state of the world and all the security headache and insecurities and peak bugs and whatnot, maybe you want to play a fine game. And anyway, but it has a patch for Linux, yay, runs in Wine. 2020 compatibility, 21 years later, one of the best, some say the best, finest games allegedly, maybe, gets a patch to work. Worm Armageddon now runs well under Wine and Proton on Linux. It's like, yay, finally 21 years in the making. So if all this stuff makes it a little bit depressive, you sit at home, self-isolation, at least you can play Worm Armageddon in Wine now. Is that not something? You heard it here, maybe first, hopefully, maybe. That's it for today. Still thinking how to best advance this format. 34 1 minutes, 1.2% drop frames, 338. Still need to think. I said this already a couple of dozen times. Maybe daily short segments, like 5 minutes, might be better for many people, but yeah, time and stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it anyway and learned something. As always, leave in the comments below what you think of all those fine topics, and if you find something I should cover, send it in too. I hope you have a good weekend and